Jessica, we need to talk. Isabella Moretti's voice cut through the ambient chatter of the busy restaurant like a blade. She stood near the kitchen door, her silver hair perfectly styled, wearing the black dress she reserved for serious occasions. At 62, she commanded respect from everyone in her orbit. Everyone except me, apparently. I followed her to the private dining room in the back, where the rest of the family was already seated. My husband David looked uncomfortable, his shoulders tense as he avoided my eyes. His sister Maria sat smugly beside her new boyfriend, our investment banker she'd been parading around like a trophy. David's younger brother Tony shifted nervously in his chair, clearly aware that something unpleasant was about to happen. Jessica, Isabella began, her Italian accent thickening with emotion, I've been thinking about our family gatherings and I've made a decision. I felt my stomach drop, though I kept my expression neutral. After 15 years in commercial banking and finance, I'd learned to never show weakness, especially when sensing an attack. You won't be joining us for Sunday dinners anymore, she announced, her words landing like physical blows. My son deserves better than a nobody who brings nothing to this family. The room fell silent except for the distant clatter of dishes from the main restaurant. Maria's boyfriend smirked, clearly enjoying the drama. David finally looked up, his face pale. Ma, that's not... he started, but Isabella raised her hand. David, you're my son and I love you. But you married beneath yourself and it's time we stopped pretending otherwise. She turned back to me, her dark eyes cold. Jessica contributes nothing to this family. She has no children, no real career, just some little job at a bank that nobody cares about. Meanwhile, Maria is engaged to Thomas here, who works in private equity and actually understands business. I stood slowly, my purse clutched in my hands. I understand, Isabella. I'll make sure this doesn't happen again. Good. David, you're always welcome, of course. Family is family. But some people, she glanced at me with disdain, just don't belong. I walked out of that private dining room with my head held high, past the tables full of happy families, past the framed photos of Isabella's grandfather who'd started the restaurant in 1952, past the awards and reviews that praised Isabella's kitchen as a cornerstone of authentic Italian dining. What Isabella didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just some little bank employee. I was the senior vice president of commercial lending at Metropolitan Trust, the largest commercial bank in the state. I'd been managing high-value commercial loans for the past 8 years, including restaurant financing, real estate development, and small business acquisitions. More importantly, I was the loan officer who'd approved the $400,000 refinancing package that had kept Isabella's kitchen afloat during the pandemic. The loan that was secured against the restaurant property, the equipment, and Isabella's personal residence. The loan that had very specific terms about family involvement in business operations, terms that Isabella had been quietly violating for months. I drove home to the penthouse David and I shared, the one I'd purchased with my signing bonus when I was promoted to SVP. David arrived 2 hours later looking defeated. Jess, I'm sorry. I should have stood up to her, but you know how she gets. It's fine, David. I poured myself a glass of wine, the expensive Burlo I kept for special occasions. Your mother made her feelings clear. He sat beside me on the leather sofa I'd bought with my own money, in the home I'd purchased with my own credit. She'll come around. She's just protective of the family business, especially with everything that's been challenging lately. Challenging how? I asked, though I already knew the answer from the monthly financial reports I received on all my commercial accounts. The restaurant's been struggling. Revenue is down, costs are up, and she's been stressed about making the loan payments. David rubbed his forehead. She thinks if I weren't spending money on our lifestyle, I could help more with the restaurant. I almost laughed. Our lifestyle was funded entirely by my salary and bonuses. David worked as a freelance graphic designer, making maybe $30,000 a year when he had good clients. The irony was devastating. Isabella thought her son was supporting a deadweight wife, when in reality I was supporting him. David, how much do you know about your mother's restaurant finances? He shrugged. Not much. She handles all that with her accountant and some loan officer at a bank downtown. The next morning I sat in my corner office reviewing the Morrison Holdings portfolio. As senior VP, I managed a team of 12 commercial lenders and personally oversaw loans exceeding $5 million. Isabella's kitchen was technically below my usual threshold, but I'd taken personal interest in the account when David and I got engaged. I pulled up the loan file on my computer. The numbers told a story that Isabella definitely didn't want her family to know. The restaurant was 3 months behind on payments, had violated several loan covenants, and was operating at a significant loss. Without the Paycheck Protection Program loans from the pandemic, Isabella's kitchen would have closed permanently 2 years ago. My assistant knocked on the door. "Jessica, you have the Morrison Holdings meeting in 10 minutes and there's a call holding for you, a Mrs. Isabella Moretti? Put her through." Isabella's voice came through my office speakerphone, tense and desperate. "Is this Jessica Torres from Metropolitan Trust?" "Yes, Mrs. Moretti. How can I help you?" "I received a letter about my restaurant loan. It says I'm in default and need to contact you immediately. There must be some mistake. I've been a customer of this bank for 12 years. I pulled up her account, though I already knew every detail by heart. "Mrs. Moretti, according to our records, you're 93 days past due on your monthly payment, and your debt-to-income ratio has exceeded the maximum threshold outlined in your loan agreement. But I explained to your manager last month that business was slow. The pandemic hurt us badly and we're still recovering. I understand the challenges facing the restaurant industry. However, your loan agreement includes specific performance metrics that must be maintained. When those metrics aren't met, the loan enters default status." There was silence on the other end. "Then, what does that mean exactly?" "It means Metropolitan Trust has the right to call the full loan amount due immediately, which would total approximately $387,000 including accrued interest and penalties. Alternatively, we can discuss a restructuring plan, though that would require full financial disclosure and potentially additional collateral." "I don't have that kind of money," Isabella whispered. "The restaurant is everything. It's been in my family for 3 generations." "I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Moretti. Would you like to schedule an appointment to discuss your options?" "Yes, please. As soon as possible. I have an opening Thursday at 2 p.m. Can you bring your accountant and any family members involved in the business operations?" "My accountant, yes. And maybe my son David. He's been helping with some business decisions lately." I felt a cold smile cross my face. "That would be perfect. I'll see you Thursday." After ending the call, I sat back in my leather chair, looking out at the city skyline. Isabella had no idea that the woman she'd just begged for help was the same nobody she'd banned from her family dinners. The same worthless daughter-in-law who supposedly contributed nothing to the family. Thursday afternoon arrived with autumn rain drumming against my office windows. I wore my most expensive suit, a navy blue Armani that cost more than David made in 2 months, and had my secretary arrange the conference room to look as intimidating as possible. Isabella arrived with her accountant, a nervous man in his 70s who kept shuffling papers. David walked in behind them, stopping short when he saw me sitting at the head of the conference table. "Jess? What are you doing here?" Isabella looked between us, confusion clear on her face. "You know each other?" "Mrs. Moretti," I said professionally, "David is my husband." The color drained from Isabella's face. She sank into her chair as if her legs had given out. "Your husband? But you said your name was Jessica Torres." "My maiden name, which I use professionally. I've been the senior loan officer on your account for the past 4 years, Mrs. Moretti. I personally approved your refinancing package in 2020, your emergency credit line in 2021, and your payment deferrals during the pandemic." David was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Jess, you told me you worked in retail banking." "I told you I worked at Metropolitan Trust. You never asked for details." I opened the loan file, spreading documents across the table. "Mrs. Moretti, let's discuss your current financial situation." For the next hour, I walked them through the brutal reality of Isabella's kitchen's finances. The restaurant was losing money every month, had exhausted its credit lines, and was behind on payments to multiple vendors. The building needed significant repairs that Isabella couldn't afford, and customer traffic was down 30% from pre-pandemic levels. "The bottom line," I concluded, "is that your restaurant is no longer financially viable in its current form. The loan is in default, and Metropolitan Trust has limited options." Isabella was crying now, her proud composure completely shattered. "There has to be something. This restaurant is my life's work. My father built this business with his bare hands. There are a few possibilities, I said, my voice carefully neutral. Metropolitan Trust could restructure the loan with a longer payment term and reduced monthly payments. However, that would require a personal guarantee from a qualified cosigner with significant assets and income. David leaned forward. What kind of assets and income? I slid a financial requirements sheet across the table. Annual income of at least $200,000, liquid assets of $500,000 or more, and excellent credit. The cosigner would be personally liable for the full loan amount if the business defaults again. David's face fell as he read the requirements. His freelance income barely qualified him for a car loan, much less a $400,000 commercial guarantee. Is there anyone in your family who might qualify? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Isabella looked at her son desperately. Maria's fiancé works in finance. Thomas makes good money, but he's not family yet and he'd never risk his credit on our restaurant, David said quietly. What about you, David? Isabella asked. You're married to someone who works at a bank. Maybe your wife could. She stopped mid-sentence, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. Mrs. Moretti, I said softly, I make $275,000 annually as senior vice president. I have over $800,000 in liquid assets between savings, investments, and my 401k. My credit score is 847. I am the only person in your family who qualifies to co-sign this loan. The silence in the room was deafening. Isabella stared at me with wide eyes, finally understanding the magnitude of her mistake. The woman you called a nobody, I continued, is the only person who can save your family's restaurant. David found his voice first. I had no idea. Your job, your income. Why didn't you ever tell me? You never asked, David. In 3 years of marriage, you never once asked about my career beyond accepting that it paid for our lifestyle. I gathered the loan documents. Mrs. Moretti, I'll need an answer by Friday. Metropolitan Trust will either receive a qualified cosigner and proceed with loan restructuring, or we'll begin foreclosure proceedings on Monday. Isabella finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Jessica, I made a terrible mistake. I misjudged you completely. Yes, you did. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. You decided I was worthless without knowing anything about my education, my career, or my contributions to this family. You banned me from family dinners because you thought I was beneath your son. I'm sorry. I'm so very sorry. I'm sure you are. Now you need to decide if your pride is worth losing your family's restaurant. I left them sitting in that conference room and returned to my office. Within an hour, David was calling my cell phone. We need to talk. Can you come home? I'm in meetings until 6. We can talk tonight. Please. This can't wait. I found David pacing our living room when I arrived home. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in one afternoon. Why didn't you tell me? He asked immediately. About your job, your salary, everything? I poured myself wine and sat down. Because you never showed any interest in learning. When we met, you were attracted to the idea of a woman who was independent and successful. But you never wanted to know what that actually meant. But you let me think. I let you think what you wanted to think. When your mother made comments about my little bank job, you never corrected her because part of you believed it too. David sank onto the couch. That's not true. David, in 3 years of marriage, you've never once asked about my workday, my colleagues, or my career goals. You've never attended any of my work events or met my professional contacts. You know nothing about what I do for 40 hours every week. He was quiet for a long moment. What happens now? With the restaurant? That depends on your family. Specifically on your mother. She wants to apologize. She wants to make this right. I set down my wine glass. David, this isn't about an apology. Your mother systematically excluded me from your family because she decided I wasn't good enough. She humiliated me in front of your siblings and made it clear that I would never be welcome. An apology doesn't undo 3 years of deliberate disrespect. So you'll let the restaurant fail? You'll destroy my mother's life over hurt feelings. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Is that what you think this is about? I don't know what to think anymore. I pulled out my laptop and showed him the loan documents. David, your mother's restaurant has been failing for 2 years. I've personally worked with her to restructure payments, defer interest, and extend deadlines. I've saved that restaurant multiple times and she never knew it was me. He stared at the screen. You've been helping all along? I've been trying to protect your family's business, even while your mother was telling everyone I contributed nothing to this family. I closed the laptop. The loan restructuring I'm offering isn't revenge. It's the most generous package Metropolitan Trust can legally provide. Your mother gets to keep her restaurant at significantly reduced payments, with a 2-year grace period on the principal. And if she doesn't accept? Then the bank forecloses as it would with any defaulted commercial loan. Your mother loses the restaurant, her house, and her life savings. David was quiet for several minutes. Finally, he asked, "What do you want from her?" "I want acknowledgement, David. I want your mother to admit that she judged me without knowing anything about who I am or what I contribute. I want her to understand that respect isn't conditional on whether someone fits her narrow definition of worthiness. And if she does that, then I sign the co-guarantee and your family keeps their restaurant." The next morning, Isabella called my office directly. "Jessica, may I take you to lunch today? Just the two of us." We met at a quiet cafe downtown, far from Isabella's kitchen. She looked tired and older than her 62 years, wearing a simple dress instead of her usual designer outfits. "I owe you more than an apology," she began before we'd even ordered. "I owe you the truth about why I treated you the way I did." I waited silently. "I was jealous," she continued, her voice trembling. "You're everything I wanted to be when I was young. Educated, successful, independent. I spent 40 years building that restaurant from nothing, proving I could run a business in a world that didn't believe women belonged in kitchens except as cooks. So you decided to tear down another woman? I decided you made my son's accomplishments look small. David is creative and kind, but he's never been ambitious. Seeing him with someone so successful made me feel like I'd failed as a mother." I stirred my coffee, processing her words. "So you convinced yourself I was the problem." "I convinced myself that if you were gone, David would become the man I always wanted him to be." Isabella wiped her eyes with her napkin. "I was wrong about everything. You didn't make David smaller, you made him better. And I was too proud to see it. Isabella, I've spent 3 years watching you celebrate Maria's engagement to Thomas because he's successful, while dismissing my marriage to your son because you thought I was worthless. Do you understand how that felt? I understand now. And I understand that without your help I'm going to lose everything my family built." I pulled out the loan restructuring agreement. "If I co-sign this loan, I'm personally guaranteeing $400,000 of debt for a business that's been losing money. If the restaurant fails again, I lose my house, my savings, everything I've worked for." Isabella stared at the papers. "Why would you take that risk for someone who treated you so badly?" "Because despite everything, you're David's mother. And because I believe Isabella's kitchen can succeed with proper financial management and realistic expectations." I slid a second set of documents across the table. "This is a business partnership agreement. If I'm going to guarantee this loan, I want oversight of the restaurant's finances. Monthly reports, approval authority for major expenses, and input on business decisions. You want to be a partner? I want to make sure my investment is protected. And I want to make sure this restaurant survives for the next generation." Isabella read through the partnership terms carefully. "These are very generous terms for you. You're basically taking all the financial risk while leaving me in control of operations. I'm not interested in running a restaurant, Isabella. I'm interested in preserving your family's legacy and protecting my financial exposure." She signed both agreements without hesitation. "Jessica, I need you to know, I'm proud to have you as a daughter-in-law. I should have said that 3 years ago." 6 months later, Isabella's kitchen was not only profitable but thriving. With proper financial oversight and strategic marketing, the restaurant had become busier than ever. Isabella had learned to respect my business expertise, often asking for advice on everything from menu pricing to staff management. The Sunday dinners resumed, but now they were different. Isabella introduced me to customers as her daughter-in-law, the banking executive who'd helped save the family business. Maria's engagement to Thomas had ended when he learned about the family's financial troubles, but she was dating a teacher now, someone who loved her for who she was, not what she could provide. David and I were stronger too. He'd started taking genuine interest in my career, attending bank events and learning about commercial finance. He was proud of what I'd accomplished, and more importantly, he understood the responsibility that came with success. At the latest Sunday dinner, Isabella stood up to make a toast. "To Jessica," she said, raising her wine glass, "who saved our family's restaurant and taught us all about the difference between appearance and substance." I thought about the woman who'd once called me a nobody, who'd decided I wasn't worthy of her family. People can change, I'd learned, but only when they're forced to confront the consequences of their assumptions. Sometimes the person you underestimate is the same person holding the key to your survival. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they're generous enough to use it.